So usually what it would be is that person would figure out the pattern and know that because I've lost this many times, I'm due to win. It's my turn to win. It's going to hit next. Or I've figured out the system. I've cracked the code and figured out if I play this way, my formula will hit. And so it's this magical thinking that starts to come up with. And it gets really, this will sound insensitive, and I don't mean it, but it gets fun. It gets fun to listen to some of these ideas because they're wild. And as you try to challenge them or push back on them, and bring your boxing gloves, because they defend them like it's absolute truth. To anybody else in the room, though, it doesn't make a lick of sense. And what's beautiful is that if you take a group of people and you say, here's a pattern of sorts, here's what happened, what's going to happen next, you'll get 10 different results, 10 different expectations of it, based on 10 different formulas that are formed, and every one of them are correct, in their minds, and every one of them is wrong. What's the answer? We don't know. It's an unknown event, and that's not in this training, but there's a lot of pieces about that, about the way these formula or these ideas are formed and how tightly they're cemented in. So those are examples of some of the cognitive distortions that we as people, we all do it. We all look for patterns in our everyday life. I mean, it makes our life easier to kind of know what happens next. Our stress goes down if we can understand it. So our brains are the organ of predictability, and always looking for kind of that next sequence. Gambling, it's just the perfect sequence. They design it to have that unknown attractive factor, then to where we find ourselves guessing. We find ourselves predicting what will happen. Go ahead.
I wish I would have known this, because I think about my aunt, who never, she didn't even allow us as children to play cards like spades or something. But later on in life, she was a homemaker, and she totally got hooked on gambling, and I didn't know that the slide before, and she fits into their profile, and now it makes sense, because we didn't know what happened when that's not her personality at all, but in the end, I guess a stressor of her husband getting sick or something, it just makes more sense.
Well, so before we go backwards to this slide, let's look at the next pathway. The comment, if you couldn't hear, was she was describing somebody she knew who had some predispositions, to some of the games, and her game of play ultimately became a problem. And you started touching on, there was some other pieces that made the emotional connection for her. Okay, so that's what this pathway 2 talks about. In pathway 2, it's those same ecological factors and cognitive distortions and conditioning effects that you'll see in each one of these. So because gambling itself is a behavior that's repeatable, pathway 2 says, well, look next then for some areas of childhood traumas, childhood maltreatments, some instances of just childhood development where the level of connection and the level of safety wasn't secured. Okay. It can show up later just as emotional vulnerability. So this is where a lot of coexisting or access 1, if you remember those terms, conditions fall in. Depression, anxiety, really anything else that might just be kind of coexisting that would complicate the mental status and mental well-being of somebody. And then coping motivations. And so learning that not only am I do I have these pre-existing conditions, but I notice that when I gamble, it relieves some of the stress and the pressures from those complications then. And so it becomes a sort of coping skill, coping strategy. Okay. That's pathway 2. The person you referenced over there, she sounds like maybe she was a pathway 2. Okay, where that she had availability and access to it, and she recognized that it helps me feel better. It takes me away from. Okay. Pathway 3. Pathway 3 is, again, you're building off of the same foundation of the pathway 1. And here, though, these people have more impulsive traits, more of the access to diagnoses, antisocial traits or narcissistic traits, and some of their behaviors of personality disorders and areas. they might be more disregarding of social consequences or of others' perceptions of them. They're often more, high risk takers, and they're probably looking more for the meaning in certain things. Where gambling or the behavior, gambling would have a certain meaning to them. Trying to, conquer the system or be a pathway for that. But you can see that in this model, it allows really for a clearly distinctive treatment plan that looks different, right? If you have a pathway 1 gambler, the treatment plan is going to look very different than pathway 2 or 3. And that's important then. In this model right now, this is one of the lead ones that really helps conceptualize our work as clinicians. If we can grasp components of this and say, well, what's really going on under this? And what's the relationship between a behavior, gambling, being just available and conditionable, and some of the other areas that pop up? In the belief that if it's a pathway 2 gambler, for example, to reference your friend, if we could tackle some of the other areas of pathway 2, then it might break the cycle for the need to gamble. Okay. Any questions on that? That's a heavy slide, but it's an important one. Yeah.
Okay. But this is the one that you would, rather than the escape or relief model, you feel this is broader and more applicable and more applicable?
As a clinician, absolutely.
Yeah.
What we see with the old model of action escape, and again, and it's not to discount and take everything away from this. It's an early model, and there's some nuggets in there. If you dial it down though, as a clinician, I think what most people find is that even these action gamblers have a component of escape in there.
Right.
And that,
I have females that fit the action.
oh no, yeah, it's not exclusive.
Okay, yeah, because I just didn't want to build in some bias.
No,
and say
no.
that this is females, this is male.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Maybe I should have clarified on the slide itself. It's typical, it's generalized, but this was something that when somebody was working with a male gambler, typically his style of play would be more action-y. And actually, that's kind of what led to some of the rebuttal on it, is that they were finding, well, this is too general, and it really isn't. There's a danger with it because, again, back then, there were more male gamblers, and there were a higher prevalence of casino style triggering the gambling problems. And then this is again another section that I won't get into. But we talk a little bit about the stigma and what it means to have a gambling problem. If it meant something different, and it still does, but it meant something different than at the time when a woman would come and say, I have a gambling problem, than a male then too. Mike, you got a hand up for an hour.
Yeah, and I think just the gambling field would change the models as well, because, when this was used, you're still talking about like the old terminology of the one-armed bandit, as it were, if you know that terminology, right? But slot machines are incredibly interactive now, and there are screens that completely, surround you, and there's different things going on. They're interactive. You're touching different buttons. So a slot machine can be incredibly action oriented, and with the way in which we sports bet, it used to be when you were an action gambler that was tied to so much, going to a bookie or doing something that was a little bit more secretive and thrilling, right? You can sit at home on your laptop in a dark basement and completely escape in quote sports betting, which is in this model supposed to be action and involved. And obviously, clearly, these are people at Belterra Raceway on a Tuesday morning, right? But this is not how gambling really looks, right? This is how they want us to think of it.
Yes.
So I think the gambling field would also be semi-responsible for the way in which we should look at the progression of a gambling addiction, because it again doesn't fit this model.
Last talk when Mike was up here talking about the relationship between video gaming and gambling. I mean, that's such an interesting history too, of how those two became so just intricately interweaved. And some of it goes to, your comment, just like, the gambling machine, the slot machine looked very different than it does now. I mean, there's no such thing as the gambling or the slot machine as it used to exist in. And a lot of it came with the two fields, the video game industry and the gambling industry, kind of teaming up in a lot of ways. The gambling industry would go to the E3 gaming techie world, so where they launch these big new events and these big worldwide launch games of what's coming up, and showcase to the world on their platform, look what we've just done. And as the gambling industry started going there, they said, teach us how to get people to play our games longer. And the gaming industry said, teach us how to get people to pay us money when they don't want to. And they started really kind of putting those ideas together and getting into, when you walk into the casino, I missed your name back there, but when you, Laura,
Yeah.
Laura, when you went, I mean, you felt just the energy, and like, it's a whole entertainment aspect in these
Yeah.
rooms now.
It was for me, it was a little too much, like how much was going on.
They build, not to be cliche, but they build worlds around you. You walk into that casino and you enter, I mean, it's a whole new world all of a sudden. That the video game people said, you need a new environment. And this is what it looks like. This is how you experience it, as if you, kind of step out of yourself into a different role. Go ahead.
When you go in, you stay, they don't have any clock. So they don't really want you to know how long you're there.
Yeah,
You can go to a casino, and you don't really get tired until you walk out.
yeah, the comments, if you can't hear, it's kind of describing the casino and the atmosphere and the layout. I mean, these guys are black belts of what they're doing, you won't beat them. I mean, it's all so perfectly put together, that they are the masters of human psychology, of how to get you to feel good in a place that you really don't need to be. And then again, that's not to say that they're all bad, right? That there are ways to gamble responsibly, and there are ways to go for that entertainment factor and enjoy it. But it's certainly it creates the environment of risk, though, in that public health model that just allows for that addiction to take place, for that vector to transfer and connect the two.
They do have the little thing where the 800 number, they always have those.
Yeah, so that's heavily regulated. Yeah, that's heavily regulated. So inside the casino, you should find the helpline number kind of all over the place on every single. Yeah, I don't know the number, how many times it's posted, or if it has to be so many, or just what the relationship is.
It's at the cage, it should be on every ATM or machine where you can make transactions. And it's actually on every single machine. So if you go to a racino, which again only has the slot machines, so there's a lot more slot machines than a racino than a casino, you should see it on every single machine. And again, so that's heavily regulated in Ohio. And if you look at the helpline data, by far the number one reason or way in which it's reported that the caller saw the helpline number is inside a casino or racino venue. It's not, I heard it on the radio, I saw it on TV, or a family member gave it to me, I saw it in the casino. So again, our commission does a good job of staying on top of those regulations. And yes, some of the 11 venues do the bare minimum and what's required, but a number go above and beyond with wanting to keep gaming safe. And when you talk to them, some will say, I'm a good person, I don't want to have people have addictions, but at the same time, it's a better business model. I want you to come in, win a little, lose a little, win a little, lose a little, so you continue to come back. I don't want you to come once, lose all your money and never return. That's not a good business model, right? So I think it's for some of them understanding what the risks are, and then some, have that sense as well. But a lot of our venues do go above and beyond to make sure that their patrons are playing safe and within their means.
I'm curious about co-occurrence of SUVs and gambling.
Yeah, I didn't put a lot of the numbers in here, but it's, the question was the co-occurrence rates between SUD and gambling. It's changing over time and you know, it's actually strengthening. Currently, I think it stands still about 25% of people with an SUD, 25 to 30, I think is like that range. With an SUD likely has a gambling disorder. Is that most current, Mike?
Yeah, so it's kind of like vice versa. So if your primary is SUD, it's about 25 to 30 probably also have gambling.
Right.
Whereas if gambling's your primary, it's more like 74,
Yeah.
75% also have COVID.
If, yeah,
Yeah,
Thank
does
you.
that contribute to impulsivity?
absolutely.
Distorted thinking.
Absolutely, yeah, and the great point, and so that just all the more looks at the importance of these three different pathways then, of recognizing what's underlying it and what's it connected to. And so a lot of the literature now talks about, you know, the importance of treating conditions independently but connected. And so kind of understanding, you know, what each one looks at and how it relates and how it contributes to the overarching presenting problem. But you cannot separate and you should not separate, right? And so as clinicians, we have to understand these relationships between them. Thanks for pointing that out. So a couple slides on just the side-by-side comparison. If you go through the DSM, this is DSM-5 language. And so under tolerance, you see them, you know, the substance use disorder would say it's a need for markedly increased amounts of the substance to achieve the intoxication, or markedly diminished effect with the continued use of substance to get that same effect or the same amount. Gambling disorder, they say it's the need to gamble with increasing amounts of money or time in order to achieve the desired excitement. So it's parallel there. They look at it with withdrawal, defining it. Gambling, they would say there's a restlessness or irritability when attempting to cut down or stop gambling. The concept of loss of control gets defined with gambling as being this repeated unsuccessful effort to control, cut back, or stop. So you're seeing, you know, very parallel languages here. Preoccupation is there. Being preoccupied with gambling, having persistent thoughts of relieving the past gambling experiences, planning the next venture, thinking of ways to get money to gamble next. And then the negative consequences are there. And so I broke this up in a couple different ways of where it shows up. Lying is a diagnostic criteria. So lying to conceal the extent of one's involvement with gambling. Gambling is jeopardized, or the person's jeopardized or lost a significant relationship, job, or educational career because of gambling. Relying on other people to provide money to relieve the desperate financial situations. And then we mentioned in the last one about the committing illegal acts. The committing of illegal acts was removed in DSM-5, but it was there in DSM-4, again, for the reason being that there wasn't the strength needed. What they found was that many people already meet the conditions and the criteria without having that one. So I don't think it's, I guess I should note here, or repeat what Mike had said, that in order to get the diagnosis, gambling disorder currently, it's a collection of, I'll go all the way back. It's a collection of 5 or 6 of these criteria will get you to mild severity. Does anybody know how many you need for substance use disorder? Anybody remember? For mild. Yeah, 2 to 3. 2 to 3 will get you a substance use disorder, right? Gambling, you need 5. Why do you think that is?
Still not heavily recognized.
Yeah, actually, so it's not recognized. That's pretty close. That's pretty on. Because it's a newer diagnosis, it appears that there wants to be this absolute certainty that these criteria are matching up and lining up then. That's really the best defense that I can find about it. I can't find anything that says very clearly this is why, but this seems to be like the leading argument about like that as clinicians, we want to make sure that we know what we're diagnosing, that we don't just start applying this, especially because remember all the different models that we've kind of gone through, they borrow a lot, but even the things that they borrow are different. Some models have the compulsion, some models have the withdrawal, some models have the tolerance. And so you start seeing just like this funny lining up, like, well, what are these? And so when they published it, they said, get more, essentially. Go ahead.
Another thing that, when I was reading this, like becoming qualified, I think this is kind of tricky too. Because it's kind of so infiltrated into our normal lives. I mean, I know that we would know if we were addicted or something like.
Oh, I disagree. Have you ever worked with an addict?
Condition,
Okay,
that's what I'm saying, like, it's kind of like tricky, because what if it's a person who loves to have a lottery ticket every day, you gotta make sure, and you're a clinician, but you're not, you know what I'm saying, but it's our ideas of what problem gambling might be. It seems so tricky.
so put all that into a question.
I'm saying like, it's not heavily recognized, but I think also as a clinician, this is kind of. No, I'm not.
Is it, no, don't give up.
Tricky,
Is it that,
because it can affect us so personally, like. Mentally, maybe.
are you talking about as a clinician working with a gambler?
Yeah, and so, cause you probably could, I guess I was using myself as an example.
Mhm.
Like, I could probably be the problem having, or be the problem gambler
Okay.
and not recognize,
Oh, okay, because you need more,
because you're not seeing yourself, I'm not seeing myself in here.
okay, I think I understand. So that trainings are very important for us in our field.
Yeah,
So that because again, it's relatively new still. Our understanding and what we used to think that gambling was very impulse related. And there's components that look very impulse related, right? And there's arguments to keep it back in that section still. But there was enough evidence to say, well, let's bring it up in here. Notice that was the only one they did it with. And if you're familiar with DSM-5, there's that back section that talks about areas for further study, conditions for further study. And there's one for internet gaming disorder. Okay, so that's kind of next on the heels of. But they wanted to, get a really good understanding of gambling disorder as a behavior being addictive. So I think what if I'm hearing you right, what's important to know is that as clinicians, though, we need to be confident and trained in these criteria and to help understand what are we looking at. With the asterisk that says that this likely is changing. Okay, but this is our best understanding of where we are now, and there's rebuttals about it, and we want to learn more. We've got decades and decades and decades of research and tried efforts, and frankly, bad practices with alcohol and substance use disorder that we've learned from. And we said, no, there's a better way. We're applying some of those same treatment measures, and we're seeing good effects, that we're getting good outcomes with our treatment measures now. But we're still saying, is this the best? We don't know. There's something about this behavior that's just really new. And to conceptualize it, with the general public that says things that we do every day can become addictive. And it gets dangerous to say, well, anything can be addictive. And that was what the argument was with the one journal authors looking at, and they reference in their write-up, things like dancing. And you hear things like, oh, I'm a workaholic, or, I do competitive ballet, and there's negative consequences with that. And there's injuries, high sports, high risk sports, bring injuries of sorts. And so they're clear with saying like, it can't be willfully chosen. Okay, and so again, what they're doing is just trying to start picking apart these. So in the world of research, we have a good framework. And I think that's really as a field what we're still developing. Does that make sense?
Like I'm saying, like perceptions too,
Mhm.
our own perception of what to.
Just for clinical bias, you mean?
Yeah,
I agree. I think that is important to remember no matter what we're doing or working with, but in this field especially because how available it is and how accessible it is and how normalized it is, that it certainly does bring this like, well, is it a problem? I don't know. Yeah, you just gamble. There's the clip that I know we've all seen from I don't think it's SNL, the Mad TV with the lady that comes in and sees the counselor and he's has her list and it's that, well, just stop it,
Yeah.
Oh, with,
It's so funny.
Yeah, thank you, Bob Newhart, thank you, Bob, yeah, thank you. So if you've seen the clip, you remember that in his lineup of like, we'll just stop it, she washes her hands, well, that one's okay. You know, and I think that there's that comment,
because he washes his hands.
because he washes his hands, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
right, so that's okay, because I'm doing. it.
Yes, exactly. And I think there's such a wisdom with with the comedy, because it touches on that, we as clinicians, we do bring a certain bias and we're filtering everything through the work that we do from our experiences and our understanding. And so, if we don't have a well-formed understanding of gambling and of how it's formed and what it can lead to, then yeah, and that becomes borderline unethical to offer a treatment that we're not scoped to really provide that, right? More similarities between the two. Okay, so there seems to be a pretty strong correlation between this idea of preoccupation. With substance use addiction, we see it very clearly that it's all I can think about. I'm planning my next high. I can't get it out of my mind. Then the loss of control, the ambivalence. This is an important one too. That Nathaniel, I don't know if you even recognized you were referencing it,
Yeah.
but in the stage of change piece, right? We talk a lot about ambivalence, and that some days somebody will want to stop using, and some days somebody will want to stop gambling, but then they might not. And so we have to be sensitive to that even in our treatment efforts to recognize that there's a continual assessment and reassessment of where they are. I can't tell you how many times I've made that mistake. Trying to implement treatment interventions before they were ready. And it happens, and I own it. And when we recognized it together, that, I'm treating from this angle that, we are in this action stage, and you're still back here in contemplation, like it's a strong miss. And so nothing works unless until you meet them. So we see this with behavioral gambling addiction a lot, is that the ambivalence can shift a lot, or the ambivalence is there, the stages can flip-flop a bit. Substance use is a similarity, kind of to the point that we referenced already, that the comorbid components of it. So a lot of gamblers also have areas of substance use. Alcohol use is high, cocaine use or amphetamines to kind of stay stimulated and keep in the game longer. These ways of artificially keeping the body going. Elements of escape that we've talked about. Genetics do seem to play a part, again, in the ever hunt for the addiction gene. We don't know exactly where it is, but it seems to have some kind of prevalence or prevalent piece